Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, a podcast to encourage, educate, and equip you to care for children and youth through adoption, foster, and kinship care. Hosted by an adoptive mom with over 22 years of kinship and adoptive parenting experience. She's on this journey with you. Please welcome Sandra Flach.
Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. That is 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 7. I am your host, Sandra Flach. Welcome to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey. Thank you for joining me today. I pray that you will be encouraged by this episode. If you are listening to this podcast, you are most likely an adoptive or foster parent, or maybe even a kinship caregiver. And that means you are caring for at least one child with a history of trauma and loss, but quite possibly they were exposed to alcohol or drugs in utero. And I know many of you are also parenting children with various disabilities. So all of the above can take a toll on us and our marriages as we pour ourselves into our kids. And today, we have a married couple with us who are raising children with special needs, and their own mental, emotional, physical health, as well as their marriage, have all been impacted. So we will be diving into how to build a thriving marriage as you care for children with disabilities. But first, please check out this vital resource that we have for your parenting journey.
Sandra Flach, host of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, and FASD educator Debbie Raymond, invite you to join Hope for the FASD Journey, a virtual support community for parents and caregivers raising individuals with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, diagnosed or not. This faith-based support community meets online 3 times each month, features special VIP guests, and a private Facebook group for members only, which includes Soul Care Saturday video devotionals led by Sandra and Deb. Both Sandra and Deb are adoptive moms raising kids with FASD and facilitators of the Facets neurobehavioral model. For details and to register, visit justicefororphansny.org/hope-community. That's justicefororphansny.org/hope-community.
So, did you know that FASD is the leading cause of developmental and learning disabilities worldwide? Yep, most people do not know that. So many people have not even heard about FASD or heard of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. But 1 in 20 school-age children in the United States have been prenatally exposed to alcohol. And the numbers are even higher. It's like more than 80% of children in foster and adoptive placements, out-of-home placements, have been prenatally exposed. Most are not even diagnosed with an FASD. They're either not diagnosed or they're misdiagnosed with a whole plethora of other things, that whole alphabet soup. So I find that many adoptive and foster parents and kinship caregivers are struggling with big behaviors, and they just don't really know what to do. And it's not really understood that there very well could be a brain-based condition at the root of all of it. So as a mom myself of 8 children, 5 through adoption, our youngest 2, who are young adults now, 18 and 20 years old, they were both diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome when they were little, but we were not given any resources or information or any support. So we know how isolating this parenting journey can be. And now, so many years later, I want to provide those supports and resources to parents and caregivers. and including the support community that you just heard about. These are things that I wish I had many years ago. We're providing those now for you. So if you are not sure about an FASD, what that is, if that applies to your kids, and there's so much confusing. I just spoke with parents the other day who said, "Oh no, we were told that our child was not showed they weren't." No alcohol was present when they were born, right? They weren't born addicted or whatever. They didn't have any alcohol in their bloodstream when they were born. So that couldn't possibly be the case. And I was like, sort of, it, is so, makes me want to scratch my head sometimes, because that's not what FASD is. FASD is literally exposure. Developing baby is exposed to alcohol in utero at any time throughout the pregnancy, and that exposure to alcohol crosses the placenta and actually impacts the structure and the function of the developing brain. In other words, while the brain and the spinal column and the nervous system and all of these things are being formed in the womb, when alcohol is introduced, it impacts that formation, that development at a cellular level, and changes it, impairs it. And the symptoms that we see after the child is born and as they grow up, the symptoms are developmental, right? They're behavioral, right? We don't necessarily see a disability, but they clearly have one if you're familiar with the symptoms, the primary and secondary and tertiary symptoms of an FASD. So I have workshops that can teach you more about that. I offer a free one every month. So there's 2 coming up. I have sometimes we call it a lunch and learn, but it's an intro to FASD. It's free. The next one is on Thursday, June 6th at noon Eastern time. And we just go into, all of those things so that you can have a better understanding of FASD, whether you're the parent or caregiver, whether you are the babysitter, the school teacher, the next door neighbor, the grandparent, anyone in a child's life, right? So if you're parenting a kiddo and you know that they were prenatally exposed to alcohol, and maybe you feel like you've got a good handle on it, but you need the grandparents to understand better, or whoever, in your child's life, that is definitely a resource. And then I also offer one that's a little bit more in depth. It's a 3-hour FASD workshop, and you don't have to take the intro first. You could do either one of these workshops. The 3 hours, a little bit more obviously of a time commitment. There's a small fee for that. And the next 3-hour workshop on FASD that I'm offering is Thursday, June 16th at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So you would go to our website to be able to sign up for either one of those and get the Zoom link for it. These are online workshops. And I always, they're interactive, and I stay on at the end for Q&A. So it's definitely something that's worth the time to be able to do. And also I offer one-on-one parent coaching. So if you really want to kind of dig deeper into the specific symptoms your kiddo experiences and the behaviors that you're dealing with, and kind of explore, why they are happening, where it comes from, and how to better accommodate for success, we get to do that, with a really personalized parent coaching sessions. So you can learn about all of the resources, including the community that you heard about in the little commercial there. You would go to our website, justicefororphansny.org, and click on the training tab at the top of the page. And then you'll see FASD and the drop down, and you can click there. You can also go to registration to register for any workshops that we have out there. So you can learn more, go there and check it out. And also, before we dive in here, that shameless plug that every podcaster has to include in their podcast, please subscribe to this podcast, leave a review if you listen on Apple. follow it, all of the things that you could possibly do. We're also on YouTube at Justice for Orphans. So you can watch this podcast if that's your jam. We're on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. So check us out, follow us, leave the review, do all of the things, because when you do, then it puts this podcast up there. It makes it more easily accessible, easier to find when desperate parents and caregivers are looking for a podcast about adoption and foster care. They will find us. So I hope that you will do that. So there, did all of the things that I'm required to do. And now my favorite part is where I get to talk to amazing guests. And today we have on not one, but two. We have a married couple with us today. Kristin Faith Evans and Todd Evans are award-winning authors, speakers, and disability parents. They earned their MA in Christian Educational Ministries at Wheaton College in Illinois and have served together in full-time ministry in church, camping, and retreat settings. Todd received his PhD from Vanderbilt University School of Engineering and currently manages his own business. And Kristin earned her master's in social work from the University of Tennessee and is a licensed social worker experienced in couples, child and family, substance abuse, and crisis counseling. Together, they have authored their new book, How to Build a Thriving Marriage as You Care for Children with Disabilities. Please welcome Kristin and Todd Evans. Hi, guys.
Hey,
Hello.
Thanks so much, Sandra, for having us.
Well, I'm excited. I know, Kristin, you've been on the show before, and we're just getting to know Todd. So just grateful to have you both here.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, we love having you guys back. I'm so excited to talk about your book and all of the things. But for our listeners who might not know you, we would love for them to learn a little bit more about your story. I know you're not actually adoptive or foster parents, but you are both certainly raising children with complex needs. I've read your book and follow your social media. I know your experience in many ways similar to that of our listeners, myself included. So would you kind of give us a little bit of the backstory about your parenting journey so our listeners can get familiar?
Yeah, so we got married a little over 22 years ago, planning to go into ministry, which we did. And then when we became pregnant with our second child, our daughter, Bethany Grace, things very quickly began to change. Todd was a youth pastor at the time, and our lives just were flipped upside down. We learned that she has a severe chromosomal deletion called Crevey-Shaw syndrome, which has caused lots of medical and developmental complications. She's our miracle baby. She wasn't supposed to survive. She's 14 now. And that with the pregnancy, the high-risk pregnancy, the 3 months of NICU, and then coming home to 24-hour caregiving for machines began our marriage journey at that point of spiraling and struggling, and then learning how to thrive as a couple.
Right. Yeah, we had this, diagnosis, as Kristen said, of how terrible it was, and to get this news of your child not being normal, and then to go to the NICU, and then think we were ready, when we came home for things, but then things, even when you prepare and know, just aren't what you expect when you get home, and I think your audience can identify with that. Oftentimes that something is more challenging than you expected, even if you know what's going on. So that kind of set us on a new path in our journey. We looked at it, and just as we got almost 2 years into it, and we're just struggling with our marriage, and marriage falling apart, and we just could not handle the stress of our well, Kristen had to quit her work. My job was very stressful and emotionally demanding and time demanding, and those kind of things. And life wasn't working. Marriage wasn't working. Our personal lives weren't working. And so we had to really look back and just say, what is going on? If we continue down this path, things aren't going to change. This diagnosis isn't going to go away. And either we have to learn to kind of relive in this new place we find ourselves, or we're going to just burn out. So that really started a journey for us, where we began just praying about where God might lead us to, and about 2 years of that before we finally uh, found an open door back to Nashville area. Ended up leaving ministry at that point, which is a very hard challenge for us, but it was closer to the hospitals for our care, for our kids, and just hoping there'd be job opportunities and things there. And then continue to work through our marriage and that kind of stuff. And then um, got to a better point and just said, hey, we can't believe we got here. God saw us through. Um, we got to help other people. And so that's kind of just our heart, is we just want to help people. We've stumbled through so much and learned lessons the hard way, and we want to try to help people so that they don't get to the same place we did, because it's a rough place to be in. So that's kind of where we are and what we hope to do for people.
Yeah, and I love that. And like you said, your daughter's 14 now, and I know your social media, she's precious because she's the star of the show, so to speak, on
Oh,
your social
thank
media.
you.
So we definitely want to encourage our listeners to check out your social media. But like you alluded to, right, the demand and the challenges raising children with disabilities definitely impacts our lives, our marriages in so many ways. So would you share a little bit, like give us a few examples of those challenges that you guys faced? I know you've ultimately been able to come through on the other side, and now you're offering support and help to families. But what were some of those big challenges, those the darker times?
Woo, there were a bunch. Every area of our life and marriage, the stress, the chronic stress, just began to impact us both mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. My mental health declined. We had no time together, no time to talk. When we did, it was very stressful, intense conversations. We separated emotionally. The chronic grief uh, nearly tore us apart because we did not understand what was happening. And we really fully now understand what was happening after researching and writing the book. And so every single area of our life and marriage was impacted in a struggle.
Wow. Yeah. Todd, do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, she summed it up pretty well. That it was definitely a struggle, and from my perspective, just trying to, um, figure out the financial side of things and how to get by with all these financial needs, and then time constraints that, job having uh, demanding all day long, and evenings and weekends a lot of time, and trying to figure out um, how to make things work. And so, for me, it was a very easy to say, oh, I'm taking care of this side of the family. And that's all I can do. I have no more to give. I have nothing else in the tank left to support Kristin emotionally, to pour more into our family than just the basic logistics of getting through the days. So yeah, it was tough. And that was just my survival technique to kind of get through it.
Yeah, and I think that's common with husbands and wives. I can see, I know in our family, my husband went off to work and was supporting, our family that way, certainly, and was able to, be home with us when he was home, but still taking care of, household things. And, it sometimes is left to mom, right, to bear the brunt of the hands-on day-to-day tasks of actually caring for our kids, and especially when there's those disabilities and navigating the medical and all of the things. And we're sometimes, and I think you guys found that, right? You're in two separate places.
Mhm.
You're in it. You're both on this journey, but in two separate places. And it's so important to understand the other person's place, right? And support them.
Mhm.
Is that what you guys found?
Yeah, we were more like business partners. Who has to go to therapy, best going to the ER. Um, it is a nurse coming today, and then it was no emotional connection.
Yeah. Business partners. That's a really good way to describe it, because that's not ideal for a marriage, right?
Yeah, I mean, I remember there were times that this was deep into some of the depression time and things like that, I'd get up for the day, I'd try to get Kristin up, and she just wasn't having a good day and just struggling with things. And I'd just be like, I don't have time for this. I have to go. Sorry. And just leave, because I couldn't deal with it. As you can imagine, that wasn't a great scenario, but it was, like she said, kind of business partners, and you got to take care of the interests of the things that you are in charge of. Um,
Yeah.
and just couldn't deal with anything else.
Yeah. So, and I think that's so common. And you've navigated these challenges, and now, like you said, you have a heart to teach couples how to build a thriving marriage by using the practical research-based tools that you personally have used, right? And you break it all down in your new book. And I want to give the title of the book for our listeners: How to Build a Thriving Marriage as You Care for Children with Disabilities. So tell us a little bit about I suspect I know why, but why did you write the book? Like, what was the aha, like, we have to do this and embark on the journey of writing the book?
I think as we struggled through the past 14 years and we really had to learn the skills on our own. There's a lot of therapists now who have the training, who have the understanding of how to help couples, but we went to marriage counseling twice. And, it was all we could do to get there. It was save every penny, get specialized caregiving, take off work, drive half an hour. And we sobbed, on opposite ends of the couch. And the counselor said, I have a book I want you to buy and read. And we were just like, oh my gosh. And of course, it was, a really good marriage book, but it really couldn't help us. And then the second time, it just wasn't helpful. So we just suffered, we struggled. And as we learned to grow and figure out these skills, I went to therapy, I went back to grad school to become a licensed master social worker. We just decided there's no reason couples have to suffer like this. Of course, the Lord has finally brought things full circle again. Been able to go back into ministry together. So,
Yeah, I
yeah.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is that, when you're in the middle of it all and you're doing all this, you don't have time to think about, oh, how can I do this better? How can I be more efficient, or how can I be more um, helpful, and look at the bigger picture? You're just focused on the day to day. And so that, like she said, our family got to a more stable place. Um, our daughter improved medically, and still has the same disabilities, but we have more care and support we built up. And with that, we were able to start thinking about these bigger picture things. And just we spent a couple years just writing the book, just thinking back through our own experiences and what were our aha moments for each chapter, and kind of putting those together. And then Kristin would especially do the research on it, and I think she read over 200 journals and books and articles to kind of get the professional side of things, and kind of piece together those. And so for us, it's really a gift to give back is really what motivated and inspired us.
I love that. And I love when you, in the book, when you're talking about your parenting journey, you use the metaphor, wilderness journey. And I know you guys, initially early on, you're before kids, right? You were doing the kind of the wilderness camping kind of
Mhm.
ministry stuff, right? And I love that. So you kind of like, it was a little nod to that, right? But take us a little bit deeper into the wilderness journey of parenting kids with disabilities, and why you chose that in the book.
So we're just trying to think of a metaphor that was easy to understand, and for us that was, like you said, our background, so it was a little bit easier. But it truly felt like that. The more we thought about it and looked at it, and we said, everybody understands the basics of camping, car camping or anything, and you have your tent and you have other things to take with you and supplies. But wilderness camping is a totally different experience, and you get out there, and the skills that you learned in your car camping don't necessarily work. You've got a nice lighter and matches for lighting your fire, but out in the wilderness, you may have damp wood, you may not have, matches even, and how do you start a fire, and how do you build that basic skill? Car camping, if it doesn't go well, if it rains, your tent gets wet, you go back to your car, and you just hop in and get out of the rain and dry off and warm up. But out in the wilderness, you're stuck. And it leads into something else that's more serious, life-threatening, even with hypothermia or anything else. You're at much greater risk out there, and so you have to have a different set of skills to survive. And for us, that was the best metaphor for where we felt we were in our marriage and in our family, is that the skills in marriage are great and they form the basis of kind of what we learned and how we grew and how we supported one another, but they just weren't sufficient. That we needed a deeper set of skills to work with, these wilderness type skills. And so that's what really brought that imagery around, and especially the idea of a survival guide, because we felt like we just were surviving in the wilderness, so to speak. And we, just like you have a wilderness survival guide that you flip to the chapter real quick and say, oh, how do I build a fire? You know, you have it in your backpack, and or how do I deal with this cut or this blister? You know, you flip to those pages and look for it. And that's what we wanted our book to be, is that guide that you're in the middle of this. You know, your families are struggling with it, and it's can I turn to one chapter and read something that gives me some insight into how I can do this better, so that I can make it through today, through the week, through the month, and get better at this.
Yeah, and
Yes.
I think that the metaphor of isolation,
Mm,
you know, we felt like we were out there stumbling around, arguing about which direction to go, exhausted, cold, wet, and it's so isolating and
yeah.
scary and shocking. And it is a journey that we can either go different directions and argue and just go in circles and never move forward together, or grasp hands and walk on the journey together, even though it may not be very fun or beautiful at the time. So yeah, there's just so many ways to compare it to that.
Yeah. And I love that because I kind of think of, every parent does the car camping, right? That's kind of like what parenting is, right? But then if you add disability, kids with disabilities, trauma, like a lot of our listeners who are
Hmm.
adoptive and foster parents, every one of our kids comes with some form of trauma and loss. So
Hmm.
it's next level parenting, right? And that's what disability parenting is. It's next level. It's wilderness, parenting. It's the wilderness journey. And yeah, there's different resources that we need for survival, and we don't want to just survive it. We want to be able
Right.
to be thriving in and through it. So I love how you use that, use that analogy, the metaphor all throughout the book,
Well,
which makes it fun and interesting and understandable.
and then one other piece, Kristen just alluded to it, is some of the most beautiful things we've ever seen are out in the wilderness. The overlooks, the sunsets, the skies. And if you're not out there and you're in the city, you're not going to see those things. And that's kind of the same thing with our marriage journey, is um, we've seen some of the most beautiful things that we would never have experienced because of where we are. And so that's the other piece of it. It's not just a hard life, but
Hmm.
it's also rewarding and just amazing things out there that if you stop and focus and look at those, all of a sudden it kind of all fades away in the beauty of what you behold.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And another piece of this though in this parenting journey is the grief and loss
Hmm.
that parents and caregivers can experience when, our dreams and expectations of what parenthood is going to be like, right? We weren't expecting the wilderness journey. So it's vastly different. So how can parents navigate the grief and the loss and that the hard stuff of this journey?
Yeah, so, we've been reflecting on that. And, even if, you went into adoption or foster care, knowing maybe the child's needs, it's really hard to imagine the impact. And, like we said, we didn't understand what was going on at the time, really until a couple years ago. And we thought we received the devastating diagnosis when I was pregnant. We grieved together, we cried together, and then we thought, okay, we've grieved, let's move on, we've accepted. And what we didn't understand was I was struggling with chronic grief, chronic sorrow, which is a very different journey for special needs parents. And Todd felt like he had grieved and moved on. He wasn't in the daily stress of going to the appointments, going to the ER. I just thought something was wrong with me because I couldn't even, I look back and it's like, why can't I get myself to do her feeding tube bolus or give her medicines through a feeding tube? Well, looking back, it was because I was still grieving. I was never able to nurse her. She was never able to drink a bottle. So, and Todd, just felt like I should move on. So, looking back, what I would say is understanding that your grief journey is very different from the typical stages, and that as couples, you're going to have very different journeys as spouses, and that's okay, and that's expected. There is, based on the research, a difference between men and women and moms and dads in terms of the grief. Women experience the waves in stronger waves and they last a lot longer. Men tend, I'll let Todd speak to this, men tend to, after they're not stuck in denial, which happens quite often, the waves aren't as strong, they don't come as often. And so what we learned through this process and researching is we have to check in with one another and we have to realize we're going to be in different states of grief, different waves of grief, and we have to be willing to journey through that grief together and listen and accept where we are, where the other person is.
And there's a certain level of trust, I think, that we've built up too that's important with grief aspect of it is I'm not always going to know what Kristen's going through. She's not always going to know what I'm going through. So we've kind of built up a trust with each other that we will share it. And that if the other person shares, that we're going to listen and try to come alongside. You can imagine in the midst of so many things going on, sometimes you just feel like, oh, I can't put one more thing on my spouse's plate. They can't handle one more thing. But in reality, that your spouse is there for you for that purpose. And so we have to kind of each reimagine a little bit of our own role in terms of two different ways. One being that we're willing to tell our spouse that something is going on, that we're not going to be a burden to them, that they want to know that information, they want to be there beside us. And then two is if the spouse tells you that information, it's that, yes, I will take the time to care, to listen, to be with you, and listen to what's going on and try to be with you in your grief. And so it's both sides of that builds up trust and kind of working through it.
Yeah, that is such a key part of it, is that we've got the loss and the grief, but then also, as Kristin mentioned, the chronic stress. And I know in I think it was chapter 1, right, you addressed the increased stress on marriages when couples are caring for children with disabilities. So so we kind of get that, right? Because we're probably all living some level of that chronic stress, and we can identify it and say, yep, that's what's going on. But what are the opportunities? Like what good can come from that?
So once we finally began to learn how to connect with one another emotionally, even though we were in very different places, dealing with it in very different ways, we began to experience an intimacy through the grief, through the learning how to cope with the stress together, supporting one another in coping with the stress and the grief. And we have found a deeper connection and intimacy that I'm not sure we could have discovered any other way if we weren't going through the challenges that we have gone through the past 14 years. And we found more joy and gratitude.
Yeah. Todd, did you want to add anything to that?
You said specifically the how do we do that? Is that what your
Yeah,
question was?
sure. Yeah, like we could talk about the how and the, and the why. Sure. However, whatever's on your heart, however you want to
Okay.
respond.
Um, so yeah, with the how aspect, it's just like I said a minute ago, being very, very open to receiving that, even at the smallest moments that your spouse shares one thing with you, um, to take that time to set aside, even if it's 1 minute, to put aside whatever else is going on. If you're cooking at the stove, just turning the burner off for a minute, to do that, because those little moments start to build up that trust level, and then they lead to bigger things. But it's still difficult at times. I was just last month. We were got away for a couple days on a vacation to try to get away um, and things, and I still had trouble, even with even with having written a book and all this, of sharing my emotions of, I was really struggling something. It probably took, as I really started dealing with it, just some of the aspects of loss and things, that afternoon. And it was the next day and in the morning, we were sitting there, in the chairs, and finally, I'd been thinking about it all night and all day, and finally, um, just broke down and told her, even though we've tried all this stuff, it's hard to share those things. And I know she welcomed my thoughts, and quickly, tried to comfort me and things, and it was everything I'd hoped for, emotionally supportive and all, but it was still challenging to do that. That's one of the things that I think is important, is just, even if it's tough to get it out there, just to go ahead and do it, not be scared of how your spouse is going to react, on anything, whether it's grief or whether it's some of the internal struggles that you're dealing with, the thoughts you have that you feel aren't necessarily good sometimes, and any of those things. It's being willing to share that, is one of the, taking that first step.
Yeah, and I can see where, we got to build trust. Couples have to build trust with each other, because you have to be vulnerable, right, to share those feelings. But then it does build intimacy, and I think can make the relationship stronger. Because it's definitely a hard road that it's not one and done, right? You guys are just, it's a continual journey, and having
Right.
to navigate that together. And with the chronic stress, getting back to that a little bit, because you guys, you still deal with that, because it's just the nature of the calling, the journey, right? So what are, give us a couple of, because I know you unpack this all throughout your book, but just a couple examples of how couples can manage that chronic stress.
One of the biggest things that is most important, that can be the most challenging to handle the chronic stress, is you have to get out of the house together. And that can feel impossible. When our daughter was hooked up to 4 machines, she'd spike 107 fever, end up in the ER. It's like, how can we possibly get away? Um, but you have to get out of the house to de-stress. And it is amazing the difference it makes. Even staying 5 miles away in a hotel room, 5 miles away, it makes a tremendous difference, especially for moms. Moms have a harder time separating the stress, um, while still in the house, and that just impacts every area of the relationship. So that's one way we've learned how to de-stress together. Walking together is a fantastic way to de-stress, improve your mental health, emotions, and have time to talk. And walking, it just helps break the ice sometimes with talking and conversations. And then also, this is something we talk about. De-stressing and improving the relationship also involves individually de-stressing.
Mhm.
And so we learned to support one another in that. And our level of stress was so high about 7 years ago. Todd started doing a half Ironman training for that. I learned how to train for half marathons and triathlons. That's how high our stress levels were. But we started supporting one another in that. We started supporting one another and getting out of the house to go get a massage. And each individual de-stressing greatly improves the marriage relationship. And, it's learning coping skills. I go to therapy still. That's one way I de-stress, and Todd has been extremely supportive of that, even though it's a huge financial expense. He realized how important that is for my stress levels. There's just so many little things, little ways. Just doing a 30-second hug where you just do deep, slow breaths together. Phenomenal with how it connects you, lowers your heart rate, your stress level. It's the little things of de-stressing together.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that as well. Kristen covered most of them, so I don't have a lot more left to say. But the definite, if you hear the word chronic, that's a time-oriented word that it lasts over time. So these things we're talking about are also time-oriented. They can't be just a one-time thing. They have to be something you build regularly into your life, um, weekly, daily, if possible, things like that. So I'll jump in a little bit more about the personal level. Sometimes it seems like we have this idea of marriage and everything has to be together. But so much of it, we are individuals too. And respecting and honoring and encouraging that in the other person has been a huge growth point for us. For instance, back when Kristen was first, before we even had a thought about this book, um, I said to her, you need a couple days away. Go, I'll take care of the kids. I'll take care of everything in the house. And we rented a little condo for her in a nice quiet place that had some beauty around it too, and just said, you go. You like to write. That's how you deal with things a lot. You get away and you do that. It's my gift to you. And so allowed her to go. It refreshed her, renewed her, helped her process through a lot of things like that. And she'll do similar things for me. I had just 2 weekends ago, had an opportunity to go meet some friends that I work with online out in Denver. So I was able to fly out there, see them, see a family member out there, and just really get to connect in a different way, and be renewed in that. And then come home and be more engaged around the house and then more connected. And this thought that my wife loves me, she's given me this gift and does these things for me. And it helps build that relationship. It helps deal with that stress. I have those moments to reflect on and kind of that inner peace and to draw from in those moments when the stress creeps up, when it seems so overwhelming. I can think through those things and know that one, I've either been through them before, or two, that um, I just have a much higher level of ability to cope at that point because I've taken care of myself and each other through it. So it helps you to be prepared for it in a new way.
Yeah, I see the value in, and I've experienced it in my own marriages. We need to individually, get our batteries charged, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
right? Those things that are for us individually, and then being able to come back to it and continue and sort of stay the course, right, in the journey. So crucial. As is communication, right? Important
Mm-hmm.
in every marriage, especially in disability parenting. Yet it's often, as you've even alluded to here, so much more challenging, right? So how do we combat that? How do we make sure that we are communicating with each other as couples, as husbands and wives?
We really talk about communication on a couple different levels. Um, there's so many more logistics that you have when you're going to doctors, when you're dealing with issues like that, therapists, whatever else it might be. Um, and you just have to talk through those. There's no getting around that. So there's kind of the lower level conversations. It's more practical, problem solving, logistical type conversations. And oftentimes those monopolize our time and we can't get to any of the deeper conversations where we're able to share with one another, share hopes and dreams, share struggles, um, and just even just dream together about things that we want to do or things like that. So looking at them as kind of two different areas kind of helps us to be able to categorize them and spend more time efficiently on the first set, the logistical, and we got better at doing that and saying, okay, let's have a calendar conversation. And so we pull out our calendars and look at them and say, all right, this, and this. And we take care of that as fast as we can to take care of those things. Because when you're able to do that, then you build in some extra time that you have for the deeper conversations. So that's one way of communicating better is knowing what type of conversation you're having. In the book, we talk about 8 different types of conversations that we have, 5 on that lower level, 3 on the deeper level. And so it's really putting those in place and just saying, hey, sometimes we just have to say, this is the conversation right now. I've got to get this done. I don't have time for anything else. We got to get to school. We got to get these done. This is all I got time for. But later, let's talk. Let's talk and see how each other's doing. Let's check in. And so then at that point, like maybe over lunch or a lunch break or just a 5 or 10 minute thing during the day, we try to reach out and just say, hey, you know, how's your day going? Don't tell me about the appointments. I know those were good, and if there were something stressful about them, you need to share, do that. But let's just talk. And so trying to differentiate between those types of conversations really has helped us get better and faster and more efficient at the ones that need to be that way, so we have time for the other.
Yeah, and committing to that time. A lot of times it is when we get the kids in bed and we are tired, but we know we're going to have that time together. And that builds the trust, that builds a deeper connection of even just 5 minutes a day, guarding that time. And I think, as Todd kind of talked about, the conversations we have to have more conversations about our kids' needs. They can be intense, and then we have less time to talk about them, and we're tired. So we've had to learn coping skills in terms of these intense conversations of going into them mindfully. If one of us is hungry or grumpy or whatever, we take care of those needs and practice a mindful deep breathing exercise to go into the conversation at a better place to talk about, does our child, are we going to do surgery or not? These are intense, serious conversations that can really cause stress on the marriage. So learning how to learn those skills of talking effectively and going into it in a calm state.
Yeah, and sometimes it's the end of the day, right? And everybody's
Mm-hmm.
exhausted and it's been a long day and disability parenting, it is exhausting and draining, and we don't have much left over at the end of the day to give to our spouse. But yet, there's that intimacy, we need to be intentional. I remember even times of just, at the end of the day, there's nothing left to give even my spouse, right?
Mm-hmm.
And including sexual intimacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're drained, right? So, but yet that has to be a priority in every marriage. So how do caregivers prioritize, that more intimate part of their relationship when they're exhausted and under that chronic stress?
Yeah, so the chronic stress, that is such a big piece
Yeah.
of what impacts the marriage. It impacts you, it rewires our brain. Literally, the chronic stress does, causes chronic physical, mental health, emotional, and even spiritual struggles. And it decreases libido by 90%. Like 90% of people, if they're under chronic stress, they just can't. If you're in survival mode, that is one of the sexual intimacy is one of the last um, things on your mind, and something you can even think about. And so, lowering that chronic stress has to be a priority in order to begin to rebuild the relationship. And that is so hard for moms and women. It really, really is harder. I think at one point I was like, we have to get out of the house. We have to get away. And Todd's like, we can't get out of the house every week, and you're just gonna have to deal with it. And I'm like, I can't. We got a nurse in the other room. We got a baby. We've got machines going off, and there's just no way. Um, and that chronic stress, you can't just lower it with a hot bath. Like Todd said, it has to be a daily, continual, intentional effort to reduce that chronic stress. And there's ways that are very important, which a support group is one. Being in a support group greatly helps reduce that stress and actually rewires our brains back to a healthier state. So yeah, it's the chronic stress is just incredibly important.
Yeah, and like you're saying, just being exhausted at the end of the day, and things like that, that's going to be true. And that's probably going to be true every day, for most of us that are in this situation. That's kind of what took for me of, over a year of that before I realized finally this isn't going to change. I'm not going to be any um, more energized tomorrow. I'm going to be at the same place, most likely, maybe a little worse. Um, so if it's going to continue like this, it's just not going to happen. Things aren't going to be good. We're not going to we're going to keep drifting apart. So I have got to do something to change the trajectory of things. And so I think that even on a small level, um, something you can do just to help change that direct trajectory slightly. Yes, you're tired at night, um, and the things like that. You don't want to have those conversations, don't want those things, but find a way to do one thing. That's really one of our big things that we believe in is find one little thing that you can do to change some aspect of your life, whether it's taking 5 minutes to do something like talk to each other at night. Just don't flip on the TV immediately. Just take 5 minutes. Yes, you're tired, but try it, and we think you'll see positive results. And as you start to see those positive results, you start to get energized, and so you're willing to try something else. It becomes not a chore, but something that you do. That's true whether it's emotional intimacy, sexual intimacy, any of those things. Is try one little thing, start doing that in your life, and then you'll start feeling that positive energy come back and inspire you to do more, is what we find.
Yeah, that's so important. And you also mentioned, I know Kristin just mentioned support group, right? So community, right? I know adoptive and foster parents often experience isolation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do disability parents, um, and a lot of our adoptive and foster parents are also raising kids with disabilities. So why is community so important? And what ways have you both been able to find community?
It's so important, but it's so hard to find. And it's so hard to be able to actually get out of the house, go together. But online groups actually are, they've shown can be as effective. So the important factors with being in a support group, you don't feel as alone. You feel like finally somebody gets what we're going through. The behaviors are so severe, it's hard to just deal with it or get out of the house. You learn resources. We have learned resources through support groups that I never would have known about. It's cathartic just being able to hear other people say, I've also thought, I don't think I could do this. I just want to leave. And to be able to know you're not the only one that is going through that. So support groups greatly reduce stress and help support you as a caregiver, whatever extra needs your child has. And it helps lower the stress and helps your marriage relationship.
And sometimes in those groups, this is going to sound bad, but you realize they have it worse than us. There's always somebody out there that has it worse, and it puts your own life in perspective and kind of reframing and say, man, we really have some good things here. And you're able to focus more sometimes on those. And with that, the other side is then we're able to feel like, okay, we can pray for that couple. We can, how can we help them? And kind of when you start looking at other people and not just be so introspective on your own family and life, it really, again, changes your perspective and helps you deal with those in a different way when you're not just so myopic into your own existence. So that's one of the other good things about support groups is that you are there to help one another and be a part of that, whether it's someone helping you or you helping someone else and feeling that value of being able to help someone else too.
And I would say that, how we found that support, we had to look for it. People aren't going to come up and, well, maybe, but not our experience. People aren't going to come up and say, hey, we have this support group. We want you to come. We've had to really, really look for that support. And a lot of parents don't have the time or energy to look for that support. They may have been hurt by a group previously or felt not understood, or like it just wasn't a good fit. So it takes vulnerability, it takes energy, it takes, trying to get that respite care if your child's not able to go to the respite or they don't have respite. It may take finding a group online, which there are really good support groups online. And we believe in them. We just believe in those groups so much. We have a list of them on our website, because it takes effort. And both of you may not be able to go to a support group. There was one that we found in the area pre-COVID. I think we got to go together once, even though they had respite care. Our daughter couldn't make it, but one of us would go and then come home and share. And it does, it takes energy, work, but it's crucial and it's so worth it.
Yeah, and I think there's so many out there, you can find support groups that are, really geared for whatever the
Mm-hmm.
specific disability is that your child has, or some are faith-based. We created one there, like, my two boys have fetal alcohol syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
and there are online, support groups out there for caregivers of people with FASD. But then, we started a faith-based one because I had just found that there were so many Christian families that had adopted and, all
Mm-hmm.
struggling with the same thing. So we created a faith-based online support group, and we've got, people in it from all over the country. But, being able to share, like you said, like, we're not the only ones going through this. So, knowing that we're not alone, but also everybody has some different experiences and can
Mm-hmm.
share those different resources, right? Because we don't know everything, but, you can hear from other parents and caregivers who've tried different things, or they know about different resources. So we're able to learn from one another,
Mm-hmm.
encourage one another, pray for one another. And, it's not a doom and gloom. It's a group for encouragement. And if you
Mm-hmm.
start in a group and it's not a good fit, you don't have to stay there. Keep checking until you
Right.
find that's the right fit. But definitely community is so important. And I think that's one of the great things, that came out of COVID was, doing so many things online and being able to have
Right.
access to these support groups. Because there's families that, like you said, you can't, you can't necessarily get respite. You can't necessarily bring your kiddos. But if you can carve out an hour and a half, online in an evening or whatever time, they're
Mm-hmm.
meeting online, it's much more doable. But that community is so vital.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So another question I wanted to ask was really about seeking professional help. So, and you alluded a little bit to this, Kristin, earlier, being able to have therapy. So what would you say to, caregiving parents who are, about seeking professional help? Maybe they're a little hesitant, what
Mm-hmm.
have you found? How has that helped you?
Whew, passionate about this subject. I would say, first of all, you finally just have to make a decision. You're going to go for yourself. Um, and like you said, with COVID, that has opened up the door for parents who really literally cannot get out of the house to find a reputable, good online therapist. And I would say be careful about that. There's lots of local therapists who will do telehealth. Now, sometimes I do telehealth with my therapist if I'm sick or something's going on. I will say I should have sought treatment a whole lot sooner than I did. I was suffering from post-traumatic stress from the pregnancy and the delivery. And if I had sought treatment soon for that trauma, I probably wouldn't have spiraled into a severe crisis. Todd did not understand what I was going through when I said I need to go to counseling. I can't function. The anxiety's so bad. I'm having panic attacks. I'm becoming depressed. He was like, we don't have the money. We don't have the time. You can't leave the house. More or less, suck it up. And as we know, that almost didn't end well. And so at one point, I just had to say, I have got to go to counseling. We have got to find a way. And we found a place that had a sliding fee scale. The money is a huge barrier. There are ways to figure that out financially. So I would just say, at one point you just have to say, I'm going to go do this for myself, and so that I can be healthy so I can actually take care of my child and my family. And if you are struggling, I just want to say to listeners, if you are struggling with depression or anxiety or post-traumatic stress, um, you're in a high percentage of parents caring for children with extra needs that do. 1 in 3, which I think is low because the 1 in 3 is reported. And so that experience clinical moderate depression or anxiety. So if you are experiencing it, I'm not surprised. There's nothing wrong with you as a parent. Um, it'd be surprising if you weren't struggling. And so I just, want to encourage people to seek help. There are resources, and you just got to speak up for yourself and finally decide, especially in the Christian community, that you don't care about the stigma. What will people think?
Yeah, and it's not just for you. Certainly, we
Hmm.
have a need. We do need that for ourselves. But like you said, if we don't get the help that we need, we're not going to be any help or of any use
Right.
to caring for our children, taking care of our families, our marriage, and so on. So it's
Hmm.
like the self-care thing, right? We do have to take
Hmm.
care of ourselves in order to be able to, be functioning and healthy and able to do the rest of it, right? So it doesn't
Right.
we can't just brush it off. We do have to take care of ourselves. Anything you want to add there, Todd?
Yeah, just like she said, I wasn't as supportive to start with. I learned my lesson that is a critical part, both through personally being able to go to some counseling myself and through seeing the changes it made in my wife. And one of those I wish I had said okay much sooner, because of what it allowed her to kind of rediscover in her life and be able to function even day to day and become a much better person, um, and a piece through that. So I would say definitely, don't be afraid to do it. Find a way to do it. Like Kristen said, there's all kinds of programs, insurances. I looked at my insurance um, company just to kind of see what copays were, and they're very, very low than lots of providers. Or oftentimes a provider will give a sliding scale, or a church might help with some of the funding of that. There's lots of ways to do it. Just find a way. Get out and do something to help you through some of those tough times.
Yeah, so good. Such good advice. So the book is How to Build a Thriving Marriage as You Care for Children with Disabilities. One of the things I do love is at the end of each chapter, you have steps to take. So there's steps parents can take, plans that they can make, and a prayer to pray. So, couples can work together through this book, which I think is wonderful. So Kristin, Todd, share with our listeners, where can we find the book? And do you guys have, I know you do, a website? Share with us that information.
Yeah, so the book is available pretty much anywhere. Your favorite book retailer, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, it's at Baker Books. They have a deal in Walmart, Target. I mean, anywhere you can find it. And our site is disabilityparenting.com. And our goal is to give lots and lots of free resources, links to resources, downloadables. And we're on Instagram at Disability Parenting.
Yeah, such great social media there on Instagram, and you get to see at their precious daughter as well. So we will put links to all of the above in the show notes for this episode, so our listeners can definitely find you guys and the book super easy. And I also wanted to include this because you chose the verse that we opened with, which is 1 Corinthians 13:7. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. What does that verse mean to you?
In chapter 2 of the book, Embrace Your Unexpected Journey, we talk about how we had to renew our vows. And Todd basically did that even after all I had done to him and hurt him. And, that verse is in weddings, it's kind of used a lot, but it really is foundational to knowing now what our vows mean, and endures through every circumstance, never loses faith, always hopeful, never gives up. And we believe that is the first step couples have to take, is being willing to commit to that verse together in order to move forward.
I 100% agree with that. It's the oftentimes when you're in the midst of this, you lose the hope. And you got to learn to be hopeful and be hopeful together, um, and learn to endure, and to not give up. Um, you're not in this alone. You have your spouse, and more importantly, you have God. So you can endure it, you can get through it, and you can thrive and become something better as a couple, as a family than you ever imagined.
Yeah, I love that. And so grateful that you guys, stuck with it and you're thriving and you're out there supporting other families so that they can thrive too. As I mentioned, most of our listeners are adoptive and foster parents. Um, we are all on this difficult journey together and caring for kids from hard places, many and many also with different disabilities. So as we wrap up today, would you each leave some words of encouragement for our listeners who are on this difficult journey as well?
Well, for me, it would just be, as you're on the journey, if you're in the wilderness, it all starts with just one step of doing something. We've said a lot today, and this is probably overwhelming if you're in the midst of it and hear all those things. I can't do a group. I can't do communication. I can't do counseling. That's just too much. Remember, I don't have 5 minutes. I can't put all these things in. And what we found is it's one little step. You're not going to get through this or get healthy in one day. It's going to take a continual thing. And when you do one little piece, that other things will start to develop and you'll see the fruit of your efforts. And that'll be encouraging and moving forward. So that'd be what I would say, is just pick one thing you heard today, or one thing from our book, and try it, and just see what happens.
Yeah, and I would say to listeners who maybe they feel stressed out just from thinking about all this, just stop and take some slow, deep breaths and just sit in God's presence and breathe in His breath of life and exhale all your worries and cares and stress to Him, and trust God to give you that strength and that hope and that joy.
Yeah. And he will give you that one step to start with, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Todd mentioned, as you're sitting with the Lord, he'll direct your steps and he can show you the first step because it is overwhelming. And this does not happen overnight. We didn't get here overnight, right? We're certainly not going to be able to navigate through overnight and all of a sudden all the chronic stress be gone. But we definitely can go from barely surviving or not surviving to a place of thriving.
Mm-hmm.
And your book is going to be a great tool to help families. So I'm so grateful for that. Thank you, Kristin, Todd, for being on the show today and for all that you're doing to support disability parents. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, what a great conversation with Kristin and Todd. And I've read their book myself. It is a great, great resource for couples. If you're struggling with the chronic stress and all of the things that this journey brings, it's a great resource. I hope that you will check that out. And just grateful that you have also spent the time with us today listening to the adoption and foster care journey. I hope you were encouraged. I'm here to encourage you and equip you for your parenting journey. Adoptive, foster, kinship, caregiving, very challenging as well. And again, as a mom of a couple of young adults with fetal alcohol syndrome, it is definitely at times a wilderness journey, right? And I had to get that professional training so that I could not only help our own family, but help those of you who are listening and those of you who are also on this journey. I'm a facilitator of the Facets neurobehavioral model, and understand how chronic stress and all of these things, impact brain function, right? And I'm passionate about providing those resources for parents and caregivers who are raising kids that were prenatally exposed to alcohol. And I know that most of the time we don't even know that that is part of the journey, right? But if we have kids from foster placements, adoption, kinship, it's highly likely that they were prenatally exposed. So we need to understand that and we need to be equipped for it. So I hope that you will check out our website, justicefororphans.ny.org. Click on that FASD tab for all of the different resources that we offer specifically for raising kids who are prenatally exposed. There's a link in our website I also blog at sandraflach.com. A lot of times those blog posts are specifically about our journey parenting kids with FASD. So I hope that you'll check that out and find and follow our social media. Justice for Orphans is on both Facebook, Instagram. It's actually on LinkedIn as well. And me, you can find yours truly, Sandra Flach, on all of those platforms. And of course, our guests today, Kristin Faith Evans, also, they have an incredible Instagram. It's disability parenting. So I hope that you will check them out there as well. I follow them and am greatly encouraged. So again, thank you. I'm so grateful that you spent your valuable time with us today. Grateful to have you along for the journey.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, brought to you by Justice for Orphans. We hope you were encouraged today. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review, and share it with your fellow foster and adoptive parent friends so they can be encouraged too. Be sure to find and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Justice for Orphans. And check out our website for vital resources at justicefororphansny.org.